The project is called Liminal and Liminoid Machines, an architectural proposal for a psychedelic-assisted therapy clinic. The project positions itself an hour's drive from London in the forest landscape of Chiltern Hills, where it seeks to intervene the adjacent forest, the existing clinics on site, and its surrounding suburban homes to stage a multi-year clinical trial by the Centre for Psychedelic Research, where they will be studying the therapeutic potential of the psychedelic ibogaine. The total site is 1.5 hectares, where volunteers will firstly go through a confrontational 3-day psychedelic healing journey, after which participants, once emerging from the ritual, can prolong their treatment for longer periods, from a weekend to a week to a month or a year, as part of their healing journey, creating a platform from where they have the possibility to experiment in becoming designers of their own therapy. The project's inception comes from the anthropological understanding of liminality, one of the key stages in traditional initiation rituals. The ritual is meticulously designed by the shaman into 3 parts: separation, liminality, and integration. The folklorist Van Gessip describes the liminal passage as an upside-down world, a transitory in-between moment where one's identity is no longer and not yet, creating an integral passage for healing and initiating new members into the community. While initiation rituals have a very clearly established beginning and end, in the contemporary context it becomes more imperceptible, shifting towards what Victor Turner calls the liminoid condition. Turner argues that a whole society is in a liminoid state, suspended in an in-between moment of perpetual dissociation and mechanized repetition, constantly waiting for the next thing while our creative outcome is captured and its potentiality weaponized to make subjects into purely economic agents. The Bividi rite of passage ritual in Gabon offers a paradigmatic example of liminality. The whole village participates in the initiation ritual, which makes use of the surrounding landscape and a strictly curated architectural sequence to the village courtyard. During the ceremony, the participants, all under the influence of the psychedelic ibogaine, are stripped from their clothing to separate their identity, are heated by the forest leaves to cleanse their sins, bathed in the icy river, and given a mirror to confront their ego. At night, the subjects are buried by the community with the forest leaves to create a time to think about oneself and mortality. Here, liminality is deployed as a tool for healing, confronting oneself and the unknown, but also to transition a new member into a village hierarchy. To create a comparison of the liminal with the liminoid, we'll follow a Silicon Valley entrepreneur who developed severe depression and anxiety because of his career creating a Kardashian-approved celebrity photo booth. By following Sean through his single-family suburban home, his work-from-home office, we arrive at his full-time workspace, the Facebook headquarters, where the design of the exterior's meandering pathways provide tranquility and necessary escape from the interior's intensity, where the repetition of exposed beams and diffused lighting all dissociate him from time and space, while counterbalancing recreational activities, such as all-you-can-eat buffets and massages, create a division of reproductive and productive labor, trapping the workers' lives, just like the architecture they inhabit, into a constant work of progress. The intensity of work catalyzes the need for therapy. He is infused with ketamine, a tranquilizing dissociative whose procedure is carefully scripted through clinical protocols for his immediate relief from his life's continuous pressure. On his way home, he goes via the Esalen retreat for what on the surface looks like a basic, loose, open system of meandering pathways, villas, and visual interludes through trees. It is actually a carefully curated machine, systematized for his quick transcendence. Through investigating the architectures of the liminal and the liminoid, we see how on one hand, psychedelic rituals becomes a means of reintegrating a person into a subordinate position within a community. However, we also see that in modern life, one's desire to retreat away from the intensity of production and this consistent call to creativity becomes a form of trauma therapy, functioning as a perfect supplement to modern life, allowing the subject who must constantly remain uprooted within the liminoid crisis state to temporarily decouple from the stress, with leaving the cause of the stress intact, resulting in the permutations of civic institutions, which choreograph a situation where one is always rendered dependent on other people's designs. But there are examples, however, of where the liminoid condition is appropriated as a platform to experiment with one's form of life. The final case study explores the typical suburban home of Dara Lamer in Reno, Nevada. But what is behind the facade is beyond nothing but typical. The psychedelic chemist blasted into the volcano's interior with dynamite to accommodate a clandestine ecstasy laboratory and created a giant swimming pool, and with this establishing the Lazy Lizard school of hedonism. This counterspace of the metropolis does not outright reject the liminoid condition, but uses the given typical suburban home as a facade behind which one is able to explore sexuality, host large gatherings and ceremonies, and appropriate the site's topography to create a swimming pool and an introverted cave for synthesizing ecstasy. The design project positions itself within this Liminoid landscape by using its architectural toolkit, the hyperflexibility of MPK-20, a multisensory confrontational sequence of spaces of the BVT, and opening up to new uses the infrastructures we have at hand to experiment with one's form of life. This will be done by establishing a psychedelic-assisted treatment center. Research into the therapeutic potential of psychedelics is one of the emerging phenomena we see today, where multiple universities are researching these medicines for therapy. What I investigated from looking into pre-established psychedelic therapy clinics in Mexico and Netherlands is that this kind of therapy requires a longer-term treatment plan after their dosage, and evidence shows that this field of therapy and the architectural design of it will become really big in the next few years. The clinical ritual will be led by the Center for Psychedelic Research, where participants will be paid up to £3,000 to go through the treatment. By getting in touch with an iBegin clinician who runs the trials currently in London Imperial College, I understood the technical limitations of current studies and the meticulous safety protocols needed for its procedures. The architectural design will seek to adapt existing landscape, homes, and clinic on site by firstly incorporating a sequence of liminal spaces for the psychedelic ritual, and secondly, similar to MPK-20, deploying a service canopy onto the site that distributes services, storage, and living spaces. We start our journey through this clinical trial at our subject's home, a typical London studio flat that has become a portrait of her own mental health. Disturbed and anxious, she signs up for the clinical trial, and the 1-hour car journey towards Chilterns becomes the first stage of separation from her familiar setting. Upon arrival, she enters the existing clinic surrounded by the suburban homes. Here, the participants will get to sit together with other volunteers of the trial and have some time to get to know their therapist who will be guiding them through the ritual. They first sleep in the existing homes and be monitored for urine and blood, following a test dose of ibogaine for safety measures. They will then proceed towards a central fireplace in the courtyard to set their intentions for what they want to get out of the ritual. They will afterwards hand over their phones and clothes to completely separate them from their previous identity and continue to have a cleanse inside of the clinic's baths just before entering the main ceremony space, which acts as a sensorium affecting machine. Here the participants are dosed with ibogaine over the night and monitored. While historical rituals are cemented in their structures through hundreds of years of processes and development, this clinical ritual becomes a result of consensus, trials, and errors that constantly evolves the spatial structure of the clinical trial and its therapeutic results, aiming to create a delicate balance between confrontation from digital projections and comforting views that are opened up to the forest. After the overnight ritual, the participants are taken to the forest ward for integrating their first psychedelic experience, resting and sleeping and preparing for the next healing journey. A shared showering facility that makes use of the rock formations of the forest is provided to have the final cleanse before being buried in the forest ground. In this healing ritual, the architecture aims to work as a guide, providing both comfort and discomfort in this incredibly physically and mentally difficult ritual as a means to confront oneself. The therapeutic ritual is set in direct adjacency to the living systems on site that assist in prolonging one's integration therapy for longer time periods. This is done through a service canopy that integrates various domestic components, plumbing, and electricity in its roof, allowing the ground to have a fluid mediation between the forest and the hardscaping. A porous paver system supports this infrastructure by preventing mud and water pooling during the wet months. Services extend water piping and electrical sockets through the forest. A precast modular plinth is used for hardscaping areas with beds and core services, where together with the sliding polycarbonate panels create an insulated semi-private area for habitation. This reflective aesthetic of the infrastructure distorts perception, reflects, and confronts oneself in relation to their context, inviting one to intervene and adapt by providing the user with a range of spatial conditions and uses, where one can sleep either communally or in isolation based upon their personal disposition, cook for one another, or perhaps even open up and share one's most intimate moments with their surrounding. The same principle is also applied to the existing homes, where the canopy becomes a liminal interface between the interior and the courtyard, revealing the potential of the typical home to cater to collective domestic reproductive spaces, large cooking areas, and also more private sleeping areas as well that members can retreat to during the colder months. The existing fences and garden landscaping is altered to create a continuous field condition by extending the platform and integrating operable windows, creating different scales of activities in the typical home that can slowly spill out into the courtyard. To conclude, the opportunity to adapt one's space becomes a way of therapy in giving a moment of relief, to rethink one's daily patterns, and offering a possibility to finally have the confrontation they might have been avoiding. Participants of the ritual become members, being able to come in and out of their treatment whenever they wish, where the outcomes are taken back all the way to their own home and daily life that incrementally starts to mutate in its functioning, opening up new social relationships, curating their therapy and their space. Thank you very much.